Back on the pump fake after a little bit of a hiatus down in Indy for the combine. I got sick for a week, but we're back and right in the midst of NFL free agency. It is great to be back. I'm Jarrett Bailey with you as always, joined by the remarkable host of Minus Three Pod, Dave Dameshek, or Bobby Brister as he's known as today. It's good to see you, man. How are you?
Yeah, what's up? Yins went down to the combine.
Yeah, I didn't expect to, come back and immediately just feel like I had the flu, but apparently a bunch of other guys had the same experience. So I avoided it
Well, a
last.
lot of us aren't feeling well after Russell Wilson signed with the Steelers. Maybe that's what's plaguing you right now. Is
I
that possible? Or
well, I mean, I avoided it last year, which was good, and I didn't expect it this year, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. And now, yeah, let's just dive into the elephant in the room. The Pittsburgh Steelers giving Russell Wilson a 1-year contract, paying him almost as much as they're paying you and I at this point. I mean, goodness gracious. They also signed, just for anybody who isn't aware of like the money side of this right now, they signed Cameron Johnson, punter from the Houston Texans. They're paying him almost 3 times the amount of money per year that they are paying Russell Wilson. So just a little bit of an insight on what they're doing or how little they are paying him. I'll say to you what I've said since the signing happened, and I'll get your thoughts on it because I'm pretty sure we're probably in the same boat. Russell Wilson is better than who they had at the quarterback position last year. He's better than Kenny Pickett. He's better than Mitch Trubisky, but that's also not a very high bar. And we can look at the raw numbers of, okay, 26 touchdowns, and it's more touchdown passes last year for him than all Steelers quarterbacks combined since Ben Roethlisberger retired, and that's all great and good and whatnot. But he was also 21st in EPA per play. He's 21st in yards per attempt. It's not as if he was setting the world on fire. It was very much, go long Russ or short checkdowns that weren't really utilizing the middle of the field. It's better than what they had, but this doesn't put them over any sort of hump. I think that the difference that Russell Wilson gives the Steelers is they might lose by 10 in the wild card rather than 20. I think that's about as big of a difference as he's going to make.
I think that's potentially overly optimistic about the difference between Russ and Kenny Pickett. I don't really think. I know everybody on one hand, I get, and I keep making the same bad joke about on the same small on one small hand. There is Kenny Pickett, but on the other hand, Russell Wilson is essentially the same level of quarterback, in my opinion. Erase the preceding dozen years of evidence. I think people get a little sideways when they talk about Russell Wilson played in 2 straight Super Bowls. Yeah, he did. And if we were talking about 30-year-old Russ versus the current Kenny Pickett, it would be a no-brainer. As it is, I mean, the NFL is telling you, the NFL at large is telling you where Russ is. This idea of like, it's such a great deal. It's only $1.2 million. Why is that, Steelers? And why is it that the Giants only regarded Russ as a backup? Nobody would even give him a second year of security in wherever he was going, including the Steelers. Why is it only a 1-year deal? Why is it that the Raiders weren't even interested in taking a look at Russ? Everybody in the NFL is telling you something besides the Steelers. I think that, and again, I think it's as much about an indictment of Pickett as it is some sort of a celebration of who this new guy is. I think we're not focusing on the specifics of what Russ is at this point in 2024 as a football player, and also regarding the last few years. There is evidence, at least, that it hasn't worked out in terms of a culture fit, not in one place, in 2 places now. Seattle, where he went to those 2 Super Bowls, and then in Denver. It hasn't worked out now twice over. No one else in the league wanted him. This is very Carson Wentzy. And I do think that maybe one way to regard all this is to not invest great hopes or to get down in the dumps. We have several months. We do know it's sort of like a haircut. If you stopped the barber about a third of the way into the haircut and said, let me see where we are here, and then going wild about how unhappy you are about it. Perhaps we should wait until the haircut is complete before we render a final verdict on all this, because the fact of the matter is we know for certain that the Steelers are going to add a third QB. I don't know. Are they going to swing for somebody? Maybe in the second round. Who knows? The assumptions that we have about what is and is not a Steelers style move, you keep hearing that. It assumes that Khan is Donahoe or Colbert, which in fact he is not. He is different and making different kind of moves than those cats would have made, owed to being in a different stage in the space-time continuum and also being wired differently than those two guys are.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Khan was different than Colbert, I think, right away in terms of even last year. I mean, they made a lot of aggressive moves. Not all of them panned out, but making those, those Quan Alexander addition late in camp, or making the moves that they had to make down the stretch, and even now, immediately getting rid of Mason Cole, Mitch Trubisky, Chukes Okorafor, Presley Harvin, like just trimming all the fat away from the roster immediately, rather than trying to get something out of nothing that was there. Another parallel that I see in terms of two teams, between the Steelers, I see parallels between the Atlanta Falcons, because both teams in the past few years have said goodbye to future Hall of Fame quarterbacks, with the Falcons moving up from Matt Ryan, Ben Roethlisberger retiring.
That's a strong statement there, future Hall of Famer in Matty Ice, but we'll see.
I mean, if I had to guess, he gets in, but that's another conversation for another time. Yeah. But in that span, both teams have suffered through some of the worst quarterback play in the league, with Atlanta having to suffer through Desmond Ridder, Marcus Mariota, Taylor Heineke, the Steelers going through Pickett and Trubisky, and a hint of Mason Rudolph, who actually played well in the games that he was featured in. But Atlanta and Pittsburgh both came to this crossroads this offseason, and Atlanta said, okay, we've got a good defense, a good collection of skill position players. If we can get a good quarterback, we might be able to make a run at this thing in an NFC that's still pretty open. You give Kirk Cousins $45 million a year, $100 million guaranteed over the first 2 years of the contract, and all of a sudden the Atlanta Falcons look really fun. The Steelers did what I think most people thought that they would do, which is, okay, still, show a little bit of confidence in Kenny Pickett, not really make any sort of like real move at the quarterback position. If the Steelers ever want to get back to being talked about in the same breath as the elite teams in the NFL, eventually they're going to have to cough up quarterback money for a quarterback, because it's not 1994 anymore. You're not going to get to the Super Bowl with Neil O'Donnell. We're not going to have a Neil O'Donnell, Stan Humphries AFC Championship game again. It's not going to happen. And that's cool that, if you want to build a great defense and try to get as many stars on both sides of the ball as you can, that's cool. But it's got to be as close to a perfect roster as possible. And you're going to have a guy who can at least steer the ship, a la Brock Purdy in San Francisco, where Purdy is better than, any sort of these guys that
right.
He's better than a Russell Wilson. He's better than a Pickett. Like, I think that they're just kind of stuck in the past in a lot of ways still, and it's going to hamper them. And look, TJ Watt's not getting younger. Minkah Fitzpatrick's not getting younger. Cam Hayward sure as hell's not getting younger. Like, I feel like a lot of the past few years just feel like a giant waste.
Well, I hear you. I feel like, and there are reports at least that Cam Hayward had a big influence in bringing in Russ. To me, this is it's borderline flailing about to try and find some bargain basement answer to the situation. And I do think that I don't want to be all over the place, but I mean, I can hold multiple thoughts in my head, and I will attempt to share different directions to go there as I devil's Dameshek myself with some of my negativity. I think that we suffer from some collective form of amnesia perennially. We always assume, and I get stuck in this too, it's hard to get one of those, those superhero quarterbacks if you don't have a pick in the top 3 or 5 in the first round. And so therefore if you don't have one of those quarterbacks currently rostered, you need to trade into one of those spots to get one of those guys so that you can be competitive with Mahomes. First thing, I would remind everybody on the AFC side of things, a lot of the teams that do have those quarterbacks, the Bills have Josh Allen, the Ravens have Lamar Jackson, Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville, so on and so forth. None of those teams have been able to get their way around Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. So maybe zigging against the zag of obsessing about that guy to get that quarterback is the way to go about things in the AFC. Like we say, there's a preponderance of high-end quarterbacks, and the Steelers aren't going to get one of those guys. On the NFC, it's more of a mixed bag. Like you say, Brock Purdy would rate as maybe the second or third best quarterback. Matt Stafford probably is the best, highest pedigree guy over there on that side of things. But also what Purdy reminds, and Dak Prescott and Russell Wilson in his prime and Aaron Rodgers going 20th behind Alex Smith, who went first, is that the evaluators get things wrong a lot. A lot of guys who end up being franchise guys are found beyond the first 5 picks of the first round, sometimes on the outside of the first round entirely, or deep in rounds, in latter rounds. So I don't think it's the only way to find that guy. I think specifically where Russ is concerned, it's more of the same. We've swapped out mediocre for mediocre, where the Steelers are here. But like I say, the one asterisk I put on this at the time of this conversation is they do still need to get a third quarterback. They're going to. So I guess that's sort of it. Is it oh yeah, we better use this 6th or 7th round pick, let's take a flyer on a guy? Or is it somebody? I don't think at this point, maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe you'll chime in here in 2 minutes and be like, oh yeah, Mason Rudolph did end up re-signing with the Steelers. I don't think it's going to go that way. Guys like Tannehill now no longer make any sense. It wouldn't make any sense to get one of those guys, and I don't see why those guys would sign with the Steelers at this point. So now there's some intrigue that probably lasts at least into the draft. And, how much do the Steelers sort of want to, because at this point, it feels to me like flailing about for an answer. This is, we aren't happy with this guy. It's a real indictment on what they think of Pickett, as far as I'm concerned here. But also keep in mind, these are the same guys that you're looking at to solve this situation. These are the same guys who collectively decided, let's stick with Matt Canada. Let's continue to go with Matt Canada. And then once they show Matt Canada the door and Kenny Pickett gets hurt, they put in Mitchell Trubisky over Mason Rudolph. And they continue to look at Mitchell Trubisky and say, yep, even after the evidence provided by the second half of the Cardinals game, they say, yep, let's put him in, Mitchell Trubisky. Let's run him out. He's our better option over Mason Rudolph to beat the Patriots. After that Patriots atrocity, they say, you know what? Trubisky is still the better option for us. Yeah. And then he basically, in that moment, you figured, well, that's it. There is no playoffs on the horizon for these Steelers. And so as a last-ditch effort, they go, fine, let's go with Mason Rudolph, and he outplays both guys. Those are the guys who misevaluated their quarterback room, and these are the people who you're now saying, like, see, the Steelers know what they're doing. They just brought in Russell Wilson.
Yeah, all of those are very good points and well taken, in terms of how just poorly they've done at. I wonder how much of it also has to do with the fact that they haven't had to worry about this position. No, they hadn't had to worry about this position for, the better part of 20 years. 7 was a very nice cheat code to have, where you could enter free agency and enter the draft and have quarterback crossed off for 18 years, knowing, yep, don't have to worry about it. I'm sure that was pretty nice. However, there were still backup quarterbacks that came along. None of them turned out to be much of anything. There was a lot of, the Dennis Dixons who had the rare start and whatnot, the Landry Jones of the world, and then eventually the Mason Rudolph. But they never took a guy that turned out to be anything, even as a backup. I mean, the Patriots in that same span, they drafted Jimmy Garoppolo, they drafted Jacoby Brissett, guys who ended up being starters at some point in the NFL. So even while Ben was there, the quarterback evaluation behind him wasn't great in terms of guys that they drafted. They brought in guys like Leftwich and Batch and whatnot, but those were already proven vets at that point. So this isn't a new thing with the Steelers when it comes to not being very good at having an eye for quarterback talent, or maybe a lack thereof. I think that, by the end of day 2, I mean, could they take a guy in the 3rd round? Maybe go with a flyer on Spencer Rattler. They've got consecutive picks in the 4th round. Maybe they use one of those on a quarterback, depending on how the board falls. I don't know. I do think it'll be a draft pick as the 3rd quarterback in the room. I don't think they're going to bring in another veteran.
It wouldn't make any sense at this point to try and do something like that. I could see them trying to be cute with Joe Milton later in the draft,
Right.
something like that, some sort of a project. Um, but uh, but yeah, I mean, to me, the bottom line is this is, you know, this is a lateral move. I think we're talking way. I mean, on one hand, I'm talking a ton about it because I think it's just I think it's just much ado about mediocrity. Um, I also think, and I uh, I may be wildly naive in this because I can find very few people out there who agree with me. Everyone
Oh
has
my.
assumed that this signing indicates that Russell Wilson is guaranteed to start, that he wouldn't have signed were he not assured, or at least he perceived himself to be the guy who's going to get the gig. Um, I mean, I think it's if the Steelers felt like that Pickett has no shot, that we have no chance with this guy going forward, that he
Mhm.
is it's just a bust of a pick and we have to move forward as an organization, then I would think at that point you would then try to go and get Justin Fields. You would do something a little more extreme. You would flood the zone more than you do with a 36-year-old man whose talent level indicates the last couple of years, his game tape the last couple of few years indicates he is in steep decline. I don't care about the 26-8 touchdown interception splits. Watch him
Sure.
play. Um, the and by the way, he's a fumbler. Everybody keeps saying like doesn't turn the ball over. Yeah, the fumbles when they go to the other team, they count exactly as much as the interceptions do too. Everybody, and he lost 8 fumbles last year. He
Yeah.
fumbled away the ball in half of the Broncos games last year. That's your secure option there. Better than Kenny Pickett. Everybody. Um, the I think though, like I say, they would have maybe swung for the fences. I do think that there's a potential, like in their head, at least a collective head, that there's this Goldilocks vibe to Russ. If they bring in, as promised at the podium when the season ended, we're going to bring in competition for Kenny Pickett. If that were Jacoby Brissett or Ryan Tannehill, I think Pickett probably shrugs that off. Like, I'm
Yeah.
going to win the gig over these two either one, these old guys.
Sure.
If you bring in Cousins, if you spend what would have been required to make a move like that,
That's not
then
competition. That's
now
okay. Kirk's the
now it's
guy.
definitely Kirk. And if it's Fields, I don't know if there are enough if you have doubts about Justin Fields, by the way, you could still get Justin Fields
They still
today.
could. I mean,
It's not going to happen,
I
but
don't
you
think it's
could.
going to happen either, but it's not out of the realm of possibility.
But consider that, the price tag, we all talk these days now about the sweet spot is to have your franchise QB, but have him still on his rookie deal so you can flesh out the roster around him. Well, if the Steelers would have gotten Justin Fields for, let's say, a third round pick, they would have had Pickett and Fields, assuming the 5th-year option is picked up for Fields. You would have
Mhm.
had those 2 QBs for the next 2 years for a combined $33 million. I mean, that's bargain basement price for 2 QBs, and now you flooded the zone in the hopes that one or the other rises up. What do you get out of Russ doing that short of a Super Bowl trip? This is a 1-year blip that solves nothing going forward, and the QB market in 2025 is worse as it stands now than this one does. So you're kicking it down the road into a bleaker future. It's really weird. It's a strange move that I will allow for at this time for them to try and correct with that third move, because as it stands right now, it just feels flailing around to try and find somebody that they can throw in there. And I go back to that. This indicates to me that they really don't like Pickett. If they're willing to, if barring another move that then better explains what the thought process is here, um, I think it's an indictment of Pickett. But to Devil's Dameshek it real quick, right back the other way to seem like my brain is all over the place, which in fact it is that maybe we should take them at face value, which is we think Pickett's has a great shot of winning this gig. If he beats out Russell Wilson, then they get what they want. If they go, like I say, if it had been Tannehill, Pickett shrugs that off. If it's Fields, that's too intense. This is maybe just right. Like Russ, hey, this guy's been to Super Bowls, Pickett. Look how he comports himself in the QB room every day. Look at how he studies film. Look at him at practice when he's getting his reps. Look at the attention to detail. That's what you need, Kenny. And by the end of August, early September, he says, Kenny Pickett's like, I am now a better professional football player because of my experience with Russell Wilson, and we move forward in that direction. Maybe that's the way it goes. Maybe we have just assumed too much that Russ is definitely going to be the starter here.
I just can't understand how the Steelers in good faith can look at the past 2 years and be like, yeah, Kenny's still our guy. And we can talk about Matt Canada all we want, but as bad as Matt Canada was, he wasn't missing receivers when they were open. He wasn't pirouetting into sacks consistently. He wasn't showing any sign. He wasn't showing no signs of any sort of progression whatsoever. And two things can be true in that regard: that Canada was bad, but Pickett was bad as well. And
right,
I think a lot of it too, hearing about, still have faith in Kenny Pickett. I think a lot of that is the fact at the time he was the only quarterback on the roster. They weren't going to throw him under the bus.
Exactly. I love that. Like, why aren't they talking about Mason Rudolph more? Like, because he's a free agent, man.
He's a free agent. Yeah.
What are they going to talk about? Guys that they wish they had as their quarterback? That would be a weird move to make. Yes, of course they're going to address. And by the way, the ongoing assumption that Mike Tomlin owes the media 100% truth that you should be able to. I'm in the media. I should be able to throw my golden lasso around you and have you spill. Like, why would I tell you exactly what our plans are? What is my incentive to do that for you, media member?
Right. And you pointed out there really is no long-term answer on the roster right now. Russell signed a 1-year deal. Pickett, I don't think, is the long-term franchise answer. I think the absolute best case scenario for the Steelers is that they draft a guy, and it's similar to what happened in Seattle with Russ and Matt Flynn, where this whoever comes in just blows them away in camp and preseason, where it's evident, like, we do not care. We're not paying Russell Wilson or Kenny Pickett anything this year. That guy's the best quarterback. He's starting week 1. That's the best case scenario, where they just have someone fall into their laps and he ends up being good.
Well, if that's the case, if that's the wish, the aspiration, that they're kind of like, then you're getting into, casino games, and you're not playing sure bets. You're playing like roulette. Like, we hope that hope that guy's still there in round 3. He might be good. If you're going to play that game, then go get Justin Fields.
I agree.
Because now at least the pedigree, and you have some evidence of how he's going to perform at this level, instead of taking a complete crapshoot.
Right.
What to continue the casino game? See, I brought it all full of roulette and then a crapshoot. See,
you did. You did.
Well done, Dave. Well done.
You can't teach this type of media literacy, everybody.
No.
What do you think of the potential, or I guess the rumors now of a potential Deontay Johnson trade? Because there's a little bit of smoke to that. We saw Jerry Jeudy just go to division rival Cleveland for 2 day 3 picks. T. Higgins may be traded. He requested a trade after being tagged. I think that Higgins will obviously get more than what Jeudy went for. I think that whatever Deontay Johnson goes for, to be somewhere in the middle of a late day 2 pick, early day 3 pick, should there be a trade. Should the Steelers do this trade, in your opinion, and what do you see as the compensation should they decide to pull the trigger?
Well, I mean, the last things first, to be honest with you, I don't know. Who can tell? Because within the same offseason, guys go for wildly different, draft picks and assets and otherwise. I mean, within the same, like those things are informed by what we saw last week. Oh, Jeudy went for that. And then you see, like, how could that team make that deal at the same time that team's making that deal?
Right.
It's weird. So, who knows is the answer to that last part of the question. But, I've never understood. When Deontay Johnson had the pass catching equivalent of Steve Sack's Chuck Knobloch disease, that he couldn't throw the ball. I mean, couldn't catch the ball, like those guys at second base couldn't throw the ball.
Right.
That was disconcerting. But otherwise, he is a weapon for any offense because he can get open every single play. He is unstoppable if you man up, and if you need a first down, he will avail himself for the QB, and that's obviously um, valuable. But I also think, though, if you remove the football stuff and assume as a reminder like that, they're not robots; they are human beings. And if I don't think it's unfair, or I'm big on I lean towards the players over the bourgeoisie versus proletariat and all that.
Right.
I lean to the players on all that stuff, but I don't think it's out of bounds for your boss to say you don't need to disparage the company all the time.
Mm.
Like if Deontay Johnson is in fact disruptive to what they're trying to do, then I get trying to move on from him as much of a weapon as he is. It then begs the question: if you move Deontay Johnson, how essential is it to do something in the draft? Or Tyler Boyd, like we say, is out there. People love mentioning him because of the Pittsburgh roots and all of that. And I guess that would be a reasonable replacement, but it would be an absence for the Steelers, even though, they have one of the worst passing games in the league. On a piece of paper, it would be worse minus Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, and even the fact that they're going to be more of a run-heavy team, especially with Arthur Smith now as offensive coordinator, you need somebody who can create that natural space. Pickens is more of, hey, go long, throw it up, George will catch it if he's in the area. Deontay is, the underneath slasher who can create that natural space and man-to-man coverage. So losing him would be, not good for the offense. If they're not going to extend him, though, this is the last year of his deal. If they're not planning on extending him, they may as well get something for him. I guess that's kind of my way of thinking about it.
Sure.
No, there would be plenty of suitors. I'm sure that Buffalo would love to have a Deontay Johnson. I'm sure the Jacksonville Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence would love to have a Deontay Johnson. One of these teams that feels like they've been close, or a team like Jacksonville, who got to the playoffs, sputtered last year, needs something to get them back into the swing of things. There wouldn't be a shortage of suitors, especially for teams in an AFC where it's an arms race to try to get as much weapons as you can.
Yeah, I think it's funny, though, that if you look at receivers, and I think it's because of the personalities that wide receivers tend to have, and those are owed to the attention that they've gotten from fantasy football, and they're making the empirically dynamic plays. We aren't watching the work of the left guard as much as we are the wide receiver 40 yards downfield and all of that. Yeah. And it's produced the egos that everybody talks about, and we love to watch them. And as I say, fantasy, they're essential members of our fantasy football teams and all of that. But there's little evidence in the 21st century that high end number one is what if you want to go and win Super Bowls, you got to have that guy.
Yeah.
The guys who have the teams that have won Super Bowls, Tyreek Hill obviously did it with the Chiefs. Cooper Kupp was huge for the Rams. And after that, there's not a ton of evidence that, Randy Moss and Terrell Owens and Calvin Johnson and Antonio Brown. Okay, he did it with the Bucks, but not in his prime.
Right.
That the best receivers haven't equaled Super Bowls. I know Deontay Johnson isn't that, but our fixation with getting receivers, I think, the Steelers have typically kind of approached that the right way without, Santonio Holmes as a first round pick off the top of my head, generally waiting a little bit has sort of played out. They were ahead of the curve on that a little bit as I think receivers are approaching fungibility because they're, again, the position has gotten saturated a little bit, kind of like running back was 5 years ago.
Yeah. The star receiver now, it's like, I don't know, it's like having an appendix. Like, you'd prefer to have one. It's good to have, but when they blow up, you need to get rid of them, and you can still live without one. So I think that, like you pointed out, if Deontay is a little bit distracted behind the scenes, you can get something for him. Go
and
on
he
and do it.
But that right, and you move Deontay Johnson. Now your guy is George Pickens, and George Pickens has been combustible. I
Yeah.
think, I think you moderate and you get older and you mature maybe a little bit, but you don't know that that's going to happen. We've seen, I mean, obviously, Pittsburgh Steelers fans remember Antonio Brown. He didn't age like fine wine. He
Yeah,
aged like he was drinking a lot of maybe fine wine or just wine.
Yeah, wasn't the best ending for AB in Pittsburgh. Looking around the rest of the division though, the Bengals making plenty of moves, bringing in the likes of Mike Gesicki, Geno Stone. They just traded Joe Mixon to Houston after signing Zach Moss. I don't know. Don't sleep on Cincinnati. I feel like they're not getting as much attention as they should.
They're the all-time. They are on that short list of all-time ignored teams because Joe Burrow got hurt and their whole season was kind of sideways.
Mm-hmm.
I said that nobody has worked their way around Patrick Mahomes and those Chiefs. The Bengals have. They are the kryptonite. Burrow is the kryptonite there. They just about had him twice in Arrowhead in back-to-back title games. And I love those moves because Noah Fant the day before Gesicki. So now all of a sudden the two tight ends for Joe Burrow, I think that sets up really well as they transition away from, now, I mean, T. Higgins is real good, but I kind of like that Jamar Chase and then two tight ends on the field for Joe Burrow sounds good to me. If I were a Bungles fan, which I am not.
Right, and if and when they do trade T. Higgins, I assume that they will try to replenish what he's leaving behind in the draft. They'll probably have to add at least one with the absence of Tyler Boyd as well. But they got guys, like Andre Yacivas, who played well in his role last year, who could see a bump in production. I know it's still early. We got to see them. Their secondary has to get better. They were young and not great last year. They got to take a step forward this year. We'll see what happens with DJ Reader. But March 12th, 2024, I don't think that the Bengals are getting enough attention, and it wouldn't shock me if they fill those needs and are right back in the AC title game this coming season.
I completely agree with you, man. I think that they are before the train leaves the station. I mean, people are going to remember at some point between now. Maybe it'll be this conversation. I suspect that it probably will be that the football world will be like, you know what, those two cats are right. The Bengals have been ignored for too long now. Let's fix that. A lot of people are going to be. I mean, it's not even going to be fun in the perennial conversations that people tick off in the off season. It's like, who's the team that's going to go worst to first this year? Well, obviously Cincinnati Bengals. Right. Who's anybody going to bet on besides that team?
Right. And you know what? Maybe I don't even know what the word is, but when we talk about the Baltimore Ravens, I don't know, man. I feel like last year was kind of the peak. The Ravens just, I don't know. They're losing Mike McDonald. I don't think is a small loss.
Agree with that was my misread on the Ravens last year. It wasn't that the offense was going to be bad. It's that their defense was going to be a letdown. I couldn't have been more wrong, obviously, but I think that a lot of that did have to do with Mike McDonald as opposed to the pieces. Not to diminish the quality of the players that they had out there, but they did over the last year or by their measure, by the Ravens history, draft history, and free agent history, they didn't load up as much at the line of scrimmage, and that started to catch up with them. I do think they right that this year. They now know Ronnie Stanley is probably never getting back to where he was, and they will start to address that once again. Keeping Matabike is a big move for them. I do still question, though, where their pass rush is coming from. The way they have, and it's a fine method, I guess it's worked out for them, but their late training camp, the season's already started approach of who's the big name 30-something-year-old edge rusher. Sign him for 1 year.
Let's bring that's Jadeveon Clowney. Sure, come on in to Baltimore. Jadeveon Clowney, Kyle Van Noy, come on over. Yeah, you'll start
Houston,
for us.
Right. I mean, that's how they've kind of tried to go about it, as opposed to the Steelers treating it like a premium position that they have to draft to get, and all of that, different ways to skin the cat. But I do think that I'm bottom line is I'm kind of with you on the Ravens. It's going to be very interesting to see what they look like this coming season. And yeah, the Browns are an oddball. You know, they did this to themselves, kind of mess the Shakespearean tragedy that is the Browns. Even though they feel like, man, you know, they still look at how nice their story was last year with Flacco. There's something unseemly underneath all that that's still brewing that I think the football gods are going to make them answer for somewhere along the way. I hear you. I think I get it. Given that context that we at least have some questions. It's not a flawless team in Cincinnati. It's largely going to be propped up by the 1A QB, Joe Burrow. Right. Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are scary, but are they going to be as good as they were a year ago? And then there are the Browns. It is as rugged a division as there is, still winnable for the Steelers. So that's why I can get let's get it now. This roster is ripe if we get the QB ripe. And so I get the thought process of let's not be limited by mediocre to bad QB play. I just don't think specifically the guy who they did to solve those issues is the guy to do that for them.
Right. Well, hey, man, this is a fun little conversation about the team that you and I both enjoy. We've been Twitter buds for a little bit. It's nice to do something with you finally. What do you got coming on -3? It's a great podcast that everybody should be aware of. You got my boy Matt Verderam on there consistently. That's my guy. I very much enjoy watching you two link up when you do. But what's coming in the coming weeks?
Yeah, Verderam is gangbusters, chopping it up with us. Yes, we are continually propped up by the quality of guests we have. We have a good every week. We start off with our pal Kevin Hench. He's a diehard Boston fan. You can imagine how that vexes me over the course of every sports calendar. Sure. And hopefully Pittsburgh sports can deliver some pain to the Boston sports fans periodically. We're in the heart of free agency, and March Madness is nigh, and the puck is getting more
let's pour one out for the Pittsburgh Penguins, by the way.
That's why right now I just tried to show that I'm a comprehensive sports talker. My heart ain't in mentioning hockey right now. I don't even know why I brought it up.
It's hard. It's hard. Yeah, no.
It's for nerds. It's for nerds. Let's ignore it. Let's go Box. Let's go Pitt.
It'd be fun. Yeah, it'd be fun year for the Pirates. Could win, 77 games or so and be at least, fun to watch offensively.
That Lenardi guy, I know he doesn't have an actual seat at the committee's table, but I don't like his noise or anyone else's that has Pitt on the outside of March Madness this year. Let's go already. They do the right thing. What are we talking about? They lost a game to Missouri in November, and that's keeping them out of the tournament in March. Come on, everybody. We're better than that.
Man, I don't know if I can name a single college basketball player, but once March rolls around, everybody, hey, let's throw these brackets up. Let's see.
I'm feeling real good about how don't sleep on TCU. I really think they've been say things like that. Don't take the obvious one. Take one in a good conference that finished just below.
Find a 10 seed that you really enjoy and just ride them.
And then just say iron sharpens iron a lot. And people are like, this guy knows what he's talking about.
The most cliche things is oh man, that guy's a real lunch pail guy.
You know what you got to do? You know what? If I were, I would come out there. You got to come out there, punch somebody in the mouth, and that sets the tone. And then, it's going to come down to who wants it more. So at the end of the day, that young man can be as good as he wants to be in this league.
I tell you what, at the end of the day, I think that being a panelist on a March Madness throughout the month might not be as hard as some might make it. It might be the easiest job in professional sports.
Just react to whatever you just saw and be like, I really like the way that team's playing.
Oh, that's tremendous. Dave Dameshek, pleasure doing this with you. Would love to do more stuff with you down the road, especially as we inch closer to opening kickoff in September. Great to see you, my friend. Talk soon.
Good times. Hope it's under better circumstances.
Amen, brother. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into this week on the Pump Fake. NFL Free Agency rolls on. We'll be back next week to talk more about it.